Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. About 17 years ago, when we started out psychotactics, or an early version of psychotactics, one of the main problems that we had was money. Now, it's not like we had no money at all, because I still went to workshops. One of them was $8,000, and several of them were about $1,500 to $2,500. However, when it came to buying stuff online, we had to be a little creative. We had to figure out, how do we get this stuff? How could we possibly barter? How could we possibly do some cartoons and then get the books or get the information or get access to a course? And we got a lot of books and products that way, but it also opened us up to different kinds of strategic alliances. So what seemed like a problem, limited money, was actually a very good thing. It was a limitation, and the limitations cause you to think. In New Zealand, we have a saying, we have no money, so we have to think. And this episode is about getting smart. So let's get stuck into this episode on how to get smart and stay smart. Last month, I got an invitation from a group asking me to dinner. The dinner, it seems, was a group of startups. They wanted to spend the evening with Renuka and I and have a conversation about how to get started and then how to keep that momentum going. What they wanted most of all was the promise of the 3-month vacation. Yes, they were startups, but what would it take for them to get going? And then what would it take to stay going and still not spiral out of control? What would it take for them to become successful without being sucked into the mantra of more, and even more? The answer to their original question was relatively short, but as I chugged on my mojito, I got another question that people tend to ask me all the time. The question was, how do you get really smart? Is there a shortcut? And how do you stay smart? And that's what I would like to cover in this episode of the podcast. In my opinion, there are 2 ways to get smart, and there's one tool to make sure that you get there efficiently. So the 3 elements that we're going to cover in this podcast are, first, learning all you can in your own field. The second, learning all you can in an area where you have no expertise. And finally, working with limits. I wasn't always a copywriter. I didn't always write sales pages or articles. While I was in university, I decided to earn some money by selling my cartoons to newspapers. A newspaper called The Indian Post had just started up in Mumbai, India, and I was encouraged to meet the features editor. She went by the name of Reena Kamath. Reena, or Chips as she was called, was this incredibly kind and educated person. I was, in my own head, a cartoonist, but not a very confident one. What Chips Kamath did was to give me enough confidence to push my art a lot more. She encouraged me to learn how to cartoon even better, so that I soon published my work in other magazines, other newspapers, and by the time I was headed towards graduation day, I had 2 daily comic strips in 2 big newspapers. All of this confidence didn't mean a thing when I joined an advertising agency. Yes, you're really good at cartoons, said the creative director of the Leo Burnett agency. But you realize that advertising and cartooning are completely different, right? Once again, I was back in newbie land. I didn't know enough to get ahead, to get going in the world of advertising, in the world of copywriting. Fortunately for me, I was given the honorary title of junior copywriter. I was given a small stipend, and then I was left alone to do pretty much what I wanted, which is when I found the agency library. Now, if you're in advertising, you'll fondly remember those massively thick books called The One Show. These door-stopping books contained hundreds of real-world advertising examples. And so began my education in the world of advertising. This brings us to the first point in this article, which is learning all you can in your own field. The very concept of learning everything is, as you know, impossible. Yet, what choice do we have? Everything seems to rush along madly, and just to keep on top of things is quite a task. But do we have a choice? Back when I was in the Leo Burnett agency, the library was enough to keep me busy for months on end. And today, we have more in a folder in our computer than we had back then. Armed with little choice, here's what I do today. I read as much as I can. I plow through as many books as possible. Right now, I have 8 books sitting on my desk, and at least 4 to 5 unread on the Kindle. There are months when I'm reduced to reading books at a snail's pace, so I find it easier or smarter to read magazines and articles instead. However, my secret weapon is audio. If I'm standing in a queue at the supermarket, I'll be listening to audio. I go for a walk every day, and then I'll have some coffee. But then I manage to chomp through an hour of audio. Even while I'm making breakfast, I'll be listening to a podcast in one earbud, and I'll tell you why. On the road while walking, it's very easy to focus on the podcast. However, when I get home, my wife Renuka will suddenly pop in from the garden, and she'll want to give me some news, some information. So when I have both earbuds, it's like, hey, I'm busy, don't disturb me. So I have a single earbud, and I keep that on whenever I want to keep listening without completely shutting out the outside world. Does this mean that you have to be learning all the time? No, it doesn't. You can listen to music, you can watch videos that go nowhere, or simply bounce back into Facebook. Even so, one of the key elements that make people smart is that they don't believe in inborn smartness. The greatest champions on the planet aren't great because they were born that way. The gold medalists keep pushing themselves long after the silver medalist has gone home for the day. I started out pretty hopeless at cartoons. If you've seen my cartoons, you might not believe this, but I've seen some of the work coming out of the Psychotactics cartooning course. I can tell you quite categorically, that even while drawing for the newspapers back in Mumbai, I wasn't as good as some of the work I've seen on the course. So what is it that makes a person better? It is, and you know this, it's constant learning. I was an aspiring copywriter, I was an aspiring marketer, I was an aspiring everything you can think of. And what's changed is that learning has made a difference. What makes you great at your skill isn't some bolt of lightning coming down from the heavens. What makes you stand out is being super knowledgeable in your field. Learning the pros and the cons of your profession instead of fluffing around trying to impress everybody else. Is this obvious advice? Sure it is. Everyone knows that you need to learn a lot in your own field. However, making the most of your time is where it counts. If you can read a transcript while standing in a queue at your supermarket, then do that. If you can make dosas for breakfast while reading a transcript, then go ahead. If on the other hand you find that you're struggling to keep up with your learning, add a bit of audio into your life. You don't have to remember everything you hear, and frankly, I don't. I have to put down the learning into an Evernote file so that I don't forget the important points. And yet, to be brilliant, you have to find the ways to do things that seem impossible. But do you have to pay attention to everything? No, you don't. You want to get rid of the braggarts. Those are the kind of people that put the dollar signs on their sites to entice you. Those people who make you feel like your subscriber list is so puny and how they're sending tens of thousands of subscribers through their funnels. Even in the world of everything, you've got to pay attention to the people that fit your life and your philosophy. Which means that having a earbud in your ear all the time may not suit you at all. You may be happy just learning a lot less so that you can be who you are. Even so, remember that learning is non-negotiable. Do whatever it takes to learn a lot of stuff in your field, and you'll find that that is what clients pay for. Incredibly, tunnel vision learning won't get you as far as you could go. For that, you have to diverge. You have to learn about areas where you have no expertise. So this takes us to our second part, where we look at learning stuff in areas where you have no expertise and have no intention of having any expertise. In July 2013, I went through a life-changing experience. My niece Marcia wasn't doing too well at school, and as usual, everyone blames the student. I'm not a fan of that school of thought. I don't believe in bad students. I believe the responsibility of the student lies with the teacher. It's one thing to make a statement and quite another thing to work through the problem. In this case, my goal was to make Marcia as good as or better than any of the students in her year. What I hadn't counted on was the fact that she was going to give me the lesson of my life. Before I started working with Marcia, I knew a lot about copywriting, about marketing. I knew a lot about a lot of things to do with my work. What I didn't know didn't bother me because I was in that tunnel focus. I was trying to learn more about the things that affected my business. When Marcia came along, she brought 1,000 questions along with her. How are clouds formed? What are the names of all the types of clouds? Why can we see Venus so clearly at night? These questions led me down a road from which I have never recovered. Do you know how Prussian blue got into Hokusai's painting of the Great Wave of Kanagawa? How does Google predict the common cold with astonishing accuracy? Why do wildebeest feast on one area of grass while ignoring the other? What role does the volcano Oldonyolengai play in the epic migration of the wildebeest? What are cyanobacteria? These questions have nothing to do with your business. They have nothing to do with my business. Yet, sitting down with Marcia, and we always sit on the ground near the sofa so we can learn. All of this sitting down has taught me so much about the world around me. And then it went a bit further. My ability to tell stories, to do podcasts, it all improved radically. In a short period of 3 years, I realized that I was a walking dummy. I knew a lot about the world of marketing and business, but precious little else. Creativity is the ability to connect two disconnected situations, two disconnected objects together. As a cartoonist, as a comedian, as an artist, this is something that you learn quickly, or you're doomed to failure. You can't just go around connecting the dots on your sheet of paper. The dots have to join from another sheet or no sheet at all. To be creative means stepping into a world that isn't your own. When we look at hundreds of inventions, we see this creative streak of this disconnect It shows up time and time again. Velcro, the rubber tire, popsicles, microwave ovens, Post-it, even matches that you light. They were all the results of random accidents. Being smart involves knowing the world around you. History, geography, culture, geology, it all makes a huge difference. Over time, you get more confidence, your brain becomes somewhat like a walking internet. You realize you can see things that others can't see at all. For me, it was amazing to look up at a sunny sky and know, based on the number of cirrus clouds, that it's going to get cold and rainy in 24 hours. Just the confidence it brings you, knowing that world around you, is fabulous. But it also brings connections to your work. It brings connections in a way that you can't imagine until you start to learn about the things that are completely different, divergent from your business. The question is, where do you get all this information? It's always been in books and magazines, of course. The New Yorker magazine has almost always jumped madly from malaria to construction, from automation to the Suez Canal, from the Beatles to Vermeer. And today, they continue to do so like many other magazines that cover a range of extremely interesting topics. Equally, though, are books that you can get on Amazon. Books that explore the concepts of meditation, puppet masters, something to do with the Maasai. Books and magazines are only part of the mix, and you can learn from podcasts of every kind. I listen to the New Yorker Hour, of course, which tackles everything from Venezuela's crisis to a fascinating interview with Bruce Springsteen. To be single-minded in your quest for knowledge in your own field is a very good idea. However, it's when you step out that you learn a lot more. You become a lot more confident. And you start to make connections that lead to a better life. You can almost guarantee that learning more in your field makes for some sort of advancement. And this advancement you can measure. It's much harder to justify the time spent learning about volcanoes and clouds and Ayurveda and wildebeest. In fact, other than just random facts, it seems like a complete waste of time. And yet, I'd advise you to go down that track of randomness, even when your work-related learning already demands more time than you have. To become smart, you need to learn, you need to implement, and sticking to the work-related stuff is quite difficult. But putting on the burden of learning stuff that's not remotely related to you seems crazy. And I'd say take it on, because that starts to make the connections. So where are we going to find all this time? How are we going to be able to learn about stuff that's related to our business and then stuff that's not related to our business? We already are strapped for time, so where are we going to find this time? This brings us to the most pertinent question of all. How do we find the time? It's a great idea to learn about your work and about the world around us, but where's the time? And this was the most persistent question of all at that dinner. The answer is remarkably simple and leads us right into the 3-month vacation. Imagine you had 4 months to write a book. Do you think, given 4 months, you write the book in 3 months? This was the question we had to ask ourselves when we started Psychotactics back in August 2002. We were keen to run our business so that we had control over the business instead of the other way around. How could we take so much time off and still make our business successful? The answer, it seems, was so simple that was hard to believe. The answer is to put limits on your schedule. Put limits on your schedule, that's it. The most frequently asked question I get is, how do you manage to take 3 months off in a year? And the answer is, we assume our year is 9 months long. That's it. We assume our year is 9 months long. Now imagine you finally started up a business, or let's assume that you've been in business for a while. How long is your year? The concept of limits is what makes you smart. If you look around the internet today, you get two sets of people. People who seem to be working like maniacs to keep doubling their income, or those who are supposedly living the internet lifestyle, but still check email, do work at the beach. They do stuff while they're on vacation, and of course, to each their own. But hear me out. What makes your brain smart is downtime. Having the time to rest allows all that connected stuff and unconnected stuff to come together. This is when your brain works best. It works best when it's at rest. The way to give your brain a rest is to enforce limits. Imagine you have only 90 minutes to write an article. What can you do in 90 minutes? Imagine you have only a limited number of ingredients in your pantry. How do you whip up a delicious meal? And imagine you have only 9 months in a year. How do you finish all your work and a lot more without working every single day of the year? If you put limits on yourself, you start to become a lot smarter. These limits don't have to stop at learning. Today we had a couple of people come round to give us new garbage stickers. The Auckland Council is testing some sort of garbage system, and as part of the trial we had to buy $20 worth of stickers that would last about 2 months. When these guys came along to give us new stickers, we still had the same original bunch. In over 2 months we hadn't used the garbage bin much at all. How's that possible, you say? Same as the 3-month vacation, isn't it? You'd think a 3-month vacation would be impossible, but we've done it almost year after year since 2004. The garbage situation takes a little planning. We take our own cloth bags everywhere. We take a container box when we dine out for takeaways. We refuse all coffee in paper cups. We have our own glass and plastic cups, or we use ceramic cups at the cafe. We don't take straws, we don't take plastic bags, and we will not buy stupid cucumbers wrapped in cling wrap. So there's no garbage. The rest of the stuff goes in the compost bin. Impossible? Of course not. The key is to have a mind that imposes limits. If you really want to change your world, you have to believe you really have no time. Instead of 7 days in a week, make it 5 days in a week. Refuse to work on weekends. Instead of a 12-month year, 9 months should do nicely. Instead of trying to double your income all the time like some senseless woodpecker, try fixing your income to one that allows for a certain amount of tax, a certain amount of savings, and the rest that will make your life comfortable. Your smarts come from limits. They also come from learning. Both learning in the areas of expertise and totally outside your expertise range. The vast flow of humanity just ambles along without really putting in the effort to make their work smarter, or even to make their breaks smarter. And so it goes, year in and year out without too much of a change. It's easy to do average work. It takes a much smarter mind to do something really outstanding. So what's the one thing you can do today? Limits. Put limits on the world that you live in, and you'll see how much of a difference it makes. You might be able to do almost everything that you need to achieve in just 9 months a year. You might be able to write, draw, sing, dance in a fixed time frame. And then you might have a much better life, a much smarter life. All of this discussion came from that dinner with those startups. They went down the path of work, of how to build a business, but then we went off on a tangent into this topic, which was totally disconnected. And we could have stayed all night, but we had to leave. We had limits. So try it. Get smarter in less time, and yes, start working towards a 9-month year. And that brings us to the end of this episode. So what's happening in psychotactics land? We're conducting 2 workshops in 2 locations this year on landing pages and sales pages. It shows you how to build that sales page in fewer than 3 days, actually 2 days, and then we audit it for 1 day. Now, there's going to be a lot of fun at the workshops. We go out to dinner, we go out to lunch. It's like a workshop that you've never been to. There are soft toys, there's Elmo, there's a lot of stuff that is very unusual for a workshop, very good for learning, and you leave with a skill. The thing is that the Singapore workshop is the only workshop available, and that's on the 11th to the 13th of April 2018. So if you want to register, go to psychotactics.com. Very simple domain name, and then you go psychotactics.com/landing pages. That's only the Singapore workshop. What else is happening? The other thing that you should have before you sign up to the workshop, or basically before you sign up for anything on psychotactics, you should read the brain audit. The brain audit is considered to be the document that all our clients refer to because it helps you with overcoming hesitation. The reason why clients don't buy is because they feel risk. That is what marketing is really all about. It's about risk. Whether you're selling an idea, whether you're selling a product, whether you're selling a service, anything, there's a risk factor. And so they hesitate. And the brain audit shows you how to remove that hesitation systematically so that you get to the sale, to the conversion. And once you've read the brain audit, or once you've got yourself a copy of the brain audit, that qualifies you at some level to get on the waiting list. Now, next year, we have 3 products. That's the information products, the article writing course, and uniqueness. They're on the 25th of Jan. That's the information product. The article writing course, which is the 15th of March, and the uniqueness course, which is on the 22nd of May, 2018. The only way you can get to these pages and buy the product when it's available is if you're on the waiting list and you have the brain audit. So these are 2 conditions. We know there are barriers. We're trying to keep away people that don't want to do the hard work. So there are barriers. You have to get the brain audit and be on the waiting list. And go there and check out information products, article writing course, uniqueness. And that's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? By the time you're listening to this podcast, because this podcast has been pre-recorded, we will be in Sri Lanka. Now, there's a very interesting method that we use when we're leaving for any destination. We pretend that our flight is taking off 4 or 5 days in advance. And you know how it is when you're taking off to some destination. You're always going at it until the very last day. Well, if your flight is leaving 5 days in advance, there's no way that you can rush through it. So you have to be packed. You have to finish all your assignments 4 or 5 days in advance. What's the purpose of all of this? The purpose is very simple. First of all, packing is stressful for most people. And so with your packing done, you start to relax. That's one less thing to do. But the second thing is that in those 4 or 5 days, you can go to the cafe. You can start your vacation before you leave your home. You can see how cool that concept is, right? Because now you're getting into vacation mode before you get to your vacation spot. Usually you get to your destination and then it takes you 3 or 4 days to unwind. So you're doing the unwinding in advance. And it's worked for us. I think you should try it. Maybe not 5 days, maybe 2 days, but try it. Pretend that your flight is leaving in advance and see how it works for you. That's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now. Bye-bye.